So very excited for our topic today. We've got a ton of content to get through. We've got some poll questions we're going to throw at those of you that are joining us live. And I want to get into it in a second. But first, I want to introduce our guests today. We've got Patricia Duchesne from Sendoso and Andrew Reed from Aviva. Guys, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Glad to be here.
So today's topic, basically getting prospects better engaged, getting to in a crazy, noisy, busy world. How do we break through? So thank you again to Path Factory for sponsoring. But I want to have maybe Andrew and Patricia just kind of start by introducing yourself, your role, and yeah, we'll go from there. Patricia, you want to start?
Sure. I've been through quite a change in roles very recently. So my name is Patricia Duchesne. I am currently the head of marketing over at Sendoso. Previously, I was the CRO at Postal, which was a direct competitor of Sendoso. We were acquired in May, so now we're one big happy family. If anybody attending here has been through an acquisition, love to chat. Feel free to hit me in the LinkedIn DMs. It's been a fun and wild ride. And yeah, excited to chat with both of you.
Awesome. That would be a good topic in and of itself, like managing through M&A, from all different components, whether you're the acquired, the acquiree.
Integrating people, teams, technology, the whole thing. It's incredibly complex. Diligence itself, you could write a masterclass in it.
You could. It's the culture change, and the culture merges is the real challenge. All right, Andrew, go ahead.
Yes. So I work at a company in the ABM department. I am director of ABM, global ABM at Aviva. Aviva is an industrial software company based originally out of Cambridge, UK, but we are a global company and talk about acquisitions. I started 6 years ago. It was about 1,500 people. Now it's 6,500 people through acquisition. And then we were acquired last year by a very large conglomerate called Schneider Electric, a big French conglomerate there, quite a large company. So yeah, lots of acquisitions and stories about that I'm sure to talk about.
So our official title today for this webinar is Ghosted to Growth. And I think we've all got examples of just various, in some cases, scars from being ghosted, from prospects that get to the finish line, from candidates that get to the finish line and don't go somewhere. And I think if you were actually to have a conversation with those that we think are ghosting us, it's actually, they're not intentionally trying to avoid us. It's just harder to break through the noise. It's harder to manage the noise as a consumer. So as we sort of set the stage for this conversation, Patricia, in your experience, like, why is engagement so hard right now? Like, what are you seeing out there?
Well, if you put yourself in their shoes, and we are all on this call, we are all buyers as well as we are sellers. I struggle immensely as a buyer with ruthless prioritization. I have so many things that are thrown at me. And so when we think about our prospects, that's exactly what they're struggling with. Is like, is this thing right in front of me, what you were selling me, solving, what is my biggest priority today? I think that's the challenge, is how do you establish yourself as the foremost priority for that individual?
Andrew, what's your perspective? I mean, as a buyer and a seller, like, what do you think's happening?
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of noise and a lot of speed to market, especially with AI coming, that you can get messages in front of people and advertisements in front of people at all manners, especially digitally. And yeah, there's a huge amount of noise to cut through and to be relevant, to be personalized, and to be getting that right message to the right person at the right time. But everybody's trying that at the same time.
Well, and I'm excited to have you both as part of this conversation, because as in terms of what you sell and in terms of how you execute, it's way more than just digital, right? I think a lot of companies say like, oh, I can do great targeting and sort of these new enrichment tools can give me better signals to better target. But if you just use the same digital channels that everyone else is using, you're probably going to get stuck in the noise. And it's going to be challenged to actually get through and sort of make a difference and get the conversations you want. Before we get into this next phase of the conversation, I want to do our first poll question. And so I know that, like, for people coming here for Ghosted to Growth, something about what you're dealing with in your company right now compelled you to not only sign up, but actually show up and spend, 45, 50 minutes with here. So I'm curious to see what your team is struggling with right now. There is not a pick all or sort of select all. You have to pick one. I want to know what the top thing you're struggling with today. I'm curious. Panelists can't vote. But panelists, what would you vote for here? What seems to be the most challenged right now?
Oh, I'm reading my options. Getting buyers to respond. That one, then, which I think right now is winning the vote. Absolutely.
I say turning engagement into pipeline, I would say, for me. really, linking that to pipeline.
Are
I
those
suppose it
variations
links
of
to
a theme?
ROI.
How would you separate those, Andrew?
The ROI and the engagement pipeline.
Well, I'm thinking about getting buyers to respond, right? I agree that that is a hard challenge, and sort of you can't really turn it into pipeline unless they engage in the first place.
Mhm.
And so maybe these are sequential sort of elements of sort of getting and keeping people engaged, right? Like they actually respond, they get something, they show up on your website, they attend a webinar like this. Converting that into pipeline sort of is the next phase, but it requires that ongoing engagement, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Um, All right. So yeah, it looks like your answers are the only answers people are giving us here. Slower sales cycle, people not as worried about campaign ROI. I didn't see any votes for others. So yeah, getting buyers to respond. Um, what's changed in the last couple of years, Patricia, that is making this harder? Like why? What's changed in how people engage and how they don't engage today?
I mean, you could ask what's changed in the past 30 days, and we could probably have a whole webinar on
Right.
it. I mean, it's interesting. I was in Santa Barbara this weekend with my family. I don't know if anyone is here in California, but Santa Barbara, the first weekend in August, they host Fiesta Days. So I had my entire family in town. And my younger brother is not in SAS. And I just asked him, I asked my siblings, I have three siblings, how do you guys look for things online? How do you guys like search for technology? And he's the COO of a company. And he was like, Chat GPT, like
Mhm.
in a split second. And I said to him, do you like fill out contact forms? Do you take demos? And he's like, oh, very
Mhm.
rarely self-service. And I think that personifies what a lot of our prospects are feeling and thinking in the way that they want to engage with us. Is we're seeing a ton of AI summaries drive decision making, or at least I should say like make the pool of tools evaluated much smaller. I think that buyers are relying on references from people that they trust. And so building brand trust has really changed. It's not just review sites, it's actually getting involved with people, in networking. It's kind of like your brand has to network like someone, like a person networks.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that long gone are the days where we can simply rely on like that traditional digital paid and outbound sales motion. I think we have to be very front and center and we have to almost personify our brand.
I mean, it's kind of the ongoing deepening inconvenient truth of go to market and B2B, right? That like
Mhm.
the easier channels that we've always wanted to work best and that like are easier to put in a spreadsheet. Oh, let's just run some paid search. Let's just run some paid social. Let's just send out more emails and we'll be able to fill the funnel more. I could argue that's never really worked very well. And now it's sort of being exposed is working even less. Andrew,
Mhm.
I'm curious. I mean, when you're going after target accounts, like you're not just saying like, I'm going to throw a net out there and see whoever comes in. You got specific people, specific companies you want to engage. Talk about that trust building part early in the process. Like, what are the things you see that are working that may not even generate an immediate, like, contact us, but are the building blocks of generating trust with the right people?
Yeah, I would give an example with one of our biggest customers. This has been a one-to-one program that we worked. The deal size, which we won at the time, was about 50 million for one big deal. So it's quite a big customer in that case, and that took 18 months
Yeah.
to go through, and that was actually the company was centrally operated, so they bought centrally. But in the past, we've never talked to the people who actually use it and actually
Hmm.
create the demand internally. So that was something that we focused on. Actually, don't just focus on those 5 or 10 people in the buying group net office who are the sort of procurement, the administrators, the people who are going to organize it. Actually, focus on creating the internal demand and help the people at the head office create that demand internally as well, because they are behind it as much as we are, because they're spending all this money on the software. They want to get people to use it. So that was a great way of not just working collaboratively with sales, but actually collaboratively with the account itself,
Hmm.
in that case. So that was a great example of what we did over a very long period of time, and not just going down the ad landing page and hoping for the best. We actually,
Yeah.
worked, figured out the buying groups, figured out the key countries, the key regions, the decentralized areas, and targeted those in a sort of a pincer movement from the top and from the people on the ground using it as such.
Can we talk about this concept of the internal demand creation? right?
Mhm.
Because I think the idea that, especially when you're selling to a group where there's a lot of decision makers, where there's this buying committee, whether they call them, most times they don't think of themselves as a committee, but we know there are different people that have to reach some consensus and a commitment to change. Someone might lead that, and they have different disparate ways of thinking about that. But this idea of sort of building that in and managing that internal consensus building and commitment to change, Patricia, like, how do we as marketers orchestrate that in a more effective and proactive way?
I mean, it's unfortunately for us, we have to leverage quite a few channels to do it.
Hmm.
There's I think building valuable content and dispersing that in a variety of locations. It's not just blasting it on a blog that nobody reads,
Yeah.
but finding subreddits that are talking about things related to the service or product that you're offering, and ensuring that you're involved in that conversation. There's one of what's his name? Gary Vaynerchuk has a book that he wrote in like 2011. It's old,
Hmm.
that talks about the value of like social media. And this is back in the day when brands didn't believe that they needed to be involved. So they didn't need to be on like Instagram and MySpace and Facebook at the time. And he talks about how the best thing a brand can do is offer insight and advice, with absolutely like no strings attached to their prospects and to the community. And so that's something that I hold very dear, is like, how do we sell to marketers. So how do I offer marketers and sellers, because sellers tend to be the noisiest in that
Hmm.
funnel, value and insights into like the best practices, whether it's ABM or it's sales acceleration, that has nothing to do with Sendoso. And that is something that we focus on when we build content. Is, yes, obviously we would love to license Sendoso when appropriate, but just offering what we believe are best practices, because we believe that we are not only incredible, obviously, B2B gifting software, but we also believe that we are incredibly advanced when it comes to like our integration of AI,
Hmm.
and our outbound sales and marketing motion. So we do a lot to disseminate that content without necessarily overwhelming our
Yeah.
audience.
I mean, we're amongst friends here, I'm expecting, right? Like, I mean, the three of us been doing marketing for a while. I'm looking at some people that are in the attendee list, and like, we're on the marketing side, so we're sort of like, this is the, we can have these conversations and not worry about sort of too much pushback. If we go and have this conversation with the head of sales, we go have this conversation with the board, with our CEO, they're like, okay, I need to generate pipeline from what you're doing here. I need to have something the sales team can follow up with. And what
Mhm,
we're talking about is really sort of this concept of value deposits with an audience that doesn't want to talk to you yet, but is
mhm,
the building blocks of getting to the point where they will have preference to work with you. I mentioned this, webinar is being sponsored by Path Factory. We are a happy, successful Path Factory customer. It allows us to put content in front of people, understand, give them some pathing,
mhm.
pun intended, to what they're trying to get done. Helps us then see what they're looking at and respond in kind when the time is right. Um, Andrew, how do you have that internal conversation to say we're doing the right activity early stages of the buying journey, early stages of the funnel, that doesn't generate SQLs right away, that isn't intended to generate a response?
Yeah, I remember my first conversation when I took everybody through the amazing plan, and they said at the end of it, "How many leads did you get?" And I just sort of went,
I'm gonna guess that
"Okay,
probably
all
came
right."
from head of sales or your CFO. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's something about building relationship with sales and taking them on
Mhm.
that journey, and pilots
Yeah.
being part of the key part of that, proving out, that example I mentioned before, that was our first ever pilot about 3.5 years ago. And that was to prove the concept without investing too much, really, and to prove that it does add value, and, telling that story through proof, essentially.
Mhm.
And taking I always show it like almost like a math question, about you've got the end result, but what I want to show you the workings out of
Yep.
how we've got to that end result. All these engagements we've had, all these different activities and uplift of account engagement, all these kind of things. These, I use the 3 R's, which I'm sure everybody knows. Building a reputation, creating relationships, which turns to revenue in the long term. But we're talking long term. We're not going to be
Mhm.
um, creating pipeline tomorrow, which is always
Yeah.
seemingly the knee-jerk reaction when we're low one month.
Right.
But yeah, you just have to sort of build that confidence with your sales leader over time to prove that it works, but it works in the long term. It's not going to be overnight success.
Well, and Patricia, I think sometimes in the way we just design our efforts overall can help tell this story. So instead of thinking of it as like we're going to do all these things and it's going to be a top-down funnel approach, to
Hmm.
really build a program from the bottom up. I mean, especially the longer the sales cycle, the more complex the journey, the more likely it's going to take a body of work to
Hmm.
get the job done, understanding like all these things have to happen together and it's going to cost X amount. And here's the acquisition cost we're targeting, but it's not based on how much are we going to get for a click on search. It's based on here's the things over time that are going to work. And
Hmm.
building, you talk about sort of M&A and sort of, culture changes and simulations. Talk about the culture change of just helping people understand a different model from, the predictable revenue, predictable sales, things we read in a book 15 years ago that may
Oh
not work
yeah.
as well today.
I know. My dirty little secret is that I spent a majority of my career in sales. I'm like a snake in the grass over here. And one of the most memorable parts of like my early sales career, I was at an all hands. I used to work at a project management software, and I was an early all hands, and the CMO got up and showed all of the touch points it took to close the biggest deal that we had closed that quarter.
Hmm.
And it was 2 full slides of bullet
Yeah.
points. And that was ingrained in my brain. I was like, "Oh my god." And I've carried that with me, throughout my entire career, that it takes a village to close a deal, and usually a village to close a deal of any size. The small ones just don't get highlighted as often. Um, and I think that is something that as marketing leaders, we have to remember that consistent, almost annoying education is part of our job.
Awesome. I want to move on from the sort of complaining about what is portion of the webinar to the like what is working, what is moving the needle. And I've got another poll question coming up here in a minute. I got questions for days for our panel today, guys. But if you are joining us live and you have a question you want to ask, please throw those into the chat or into the Q&A. Would love to get that there, and we'll take care of that too. And as I ask this question to you guys, I want to throw the next poll question up. Let's just do it now. What engagement tactic are you most focused on improving in your organization? You have to pick just one, and I'm curious kind of what you're thinking about here, Andrew, as we navigate this new sort of AI driven world, this crazy busy sort of ghosted world. What are some of the things you're seeing working as part of the journey? And I realize like we can talk about tactics, we can talk about combinations of motions together, but like what are some things you see that are moving the needle now?
I would say sort of on the personalization front, really, the ability to be able to personalize at scale. AI is definitely helping that, but
Mhm.
relevance, as we talked about, cutting through the noise earlier, and we work in an industry where we're competing with the big boys like Microsoft and those kind of things, and we're a lesser known brand. So if we can hit that pain point of what exactly they're trying to achieve, I think Patricia, you mentioned earlier about the getting through to that right message as such, that does help a lot, and it takes a lot of effort to do
Mhm.
that, but it's getting easier in my opinion because you can use AI to do a lot of that background research, a lot of the aggregation of data and stuff like that to be able to get ultimately that right message to the right person at the right time at
Mhm.
scale,
Mhm.
essentially. So that's for me is the most powerful tool. And we're seeing what I could do as a one-to-one program 3 years ago, I can do now nearly 87 times,
Yeah.
Mhm.
essentially, with the similar amounts of effort. It's amazing. Technology is the biggest enabler in that.
I'm seeing Patricia. I'm curious if you see this either internally or externally. This shift from campaign thinking to systems thinking, to sort
Yeah.
of building systems that can do and can scale what Andrew was just talking about.
That's exactly what we're seeing. We actually, 30 days ago, almost to the day, we made a pretty big shift on our marketing team. And we actually moved our director of demand into a GTM engineering role for this exact reason.
Mhm.
We believe that our ability to scale is entirely dependent on our systems and their ability to fluidly move data and insights, from top to bottom of funnel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, I think so many people have that go-to-market engineer role today. It'll be interesting to me to see, like, is like just with similar to sort of account-based marketing, similar to social selling, similar to marketing automation. Like, you organizations need that focus now, but is
Mhm.
that going to become something that everyone is expected to do to a certain extent? Like, are we going to need
Oh, yeah.
the entire marketing team to be fully conversant with the AI tools around them?
I think I absolutely think so. At least I'm betting my current role on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think when you talk about, Andrew's talking about personalization, I think that coupled with real time insights, you need the entire team working to optimize those two things together, and that's very hard to do without the support of a meaningful tech stack.
Yeah,
Can
and
I
and be
ask?
honest with you,
Go ahead, Andrew.
the way that we operate is still sticking stuff together from various different sources, and it
Mhm.
isn't this amazing sort of orchestration. But I see the future of evolution of the tech stack to be able to do that, as opposed to grabbing things from here and kind of manually putting it together. But yeah, that's where I see the future of it.
Yeah. I mean, the potential, it's not even just potential, it's there now, right? I mean, you look at our poll question here. We had most people are answering real time signals, personalization. I think those go hand in hand. Buying journey mapping, again, systems, right? If this, then that,
Mhm.
breaking it down to almost an atomic level to be able to have the right conversation at the right time and reach people with the right message. Like, I think about, like, we've been, active Sendoso users for a long time. I'm not going to deploy Sendoso with every single one of my accounts. Some I'm willing to spend that money on. Some even smaller accounts that are more engaged, I'm willing to spend that on. Right. So the system
Mhm.
isn't the same for everybody.
Mhm.
And I think the tools and the system thinking allows you to segment and have the right appropriate next step, not just the right next step message and channel, but put the economics into play as well. So you're having a fiscally responsible response to that as well.
Absolutely.
Um, I mean, and Patricia, I think, like, a lot of companies that are private equity backed, right? It's not just
Mhm.
about pipeline, it's about profitable pipeline, it's about EBITDA responsibility. And so deploying tools aggressively but selectively is part of that challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. We a lot of times when we're working with companies that haven't invested in gifting before, their first
Mhm.
reaction is, "Oh, we're gonna deploy this top of funnel, and all of our SDRs are gonna offer $5 coffee gift cards to every prospect that they find on
Yeah.
LinkedIn." And our poor customer success team does everything in their power to de-incentivize that and be like, "Oh, that is not the most effective nor financially responsible way."
Yeah.
Yes, but fully aligned.
Um, I'm curious, Andrew. Let's talk about sort of engagement with the sales team, right? Because I think a lot of there are tools on the sales side that are system driven, and as we increase the sophistication of our motions, it requires a sophistication in terms of that sales and marketing interaction. Kidded ourselves 10, 15 plus years ago, and we said, well, we just generate an MQL, have someone download a white paper, hand it off to sales, and shoehorn someone into a demo. Right? That was always sort of just a terrible sort of, like, brute force approach. But now that we have different prospects at different stages with different signals, we're increasing the complexity of what we expect our sales partners to do as well. What are some keys you found to improving that sales and marketing engagement, to improving the effectiveness of sales enablement when the motions and systems are getting more complex?
From my team and my view on this is it still has to be quite a personal approach. We
Mhm,
focus on our top accounts, 87 accounts, so we're able to actually have those conversations person to person and go
mhm.
through that. We don't have some amazing system that delivers very neatly a buying group and say you should go after Tom and Dick and Harry in this and do X, Y, and Z. So it very much is using our ABM dashboards or action boards, as I like to call them, where we've built these kind of custom dashboards that give all the insights about the account and picks up intent signals, all the various different engagement signals, and says, working with the account manager to plan out either pivot the current ABM campaign or go outbound in a tactic there. We don't do sort of programmatic ABM. Most of the ABM we do is one to one or one to few. So
Yeah.
there's not sort of big sort of SDR play where we do lots of kind of things. There is teams who do that, but nothing as complex as what you're talking about.
Let's talk about, if you wouldn't mind, what doesn't work, what didn't work, right? I mean, in as we increase the sophistication of our systems and programs, we all live in glass houses, and there's things that we try that don't work. There's cautionary tales and dumpster fires and various things across the degrees. For those that are attending live, also those are listening on demand, I'd love to hear some things you tried that haven't worked, that didn't work, that maybe just doesn't work yet, right? I think one of the great things about the AI revolution is that we're sort of experimenting with things that we previously thought were impossible. And we
Mhm.
continue to look at AI to do things that it can't yet do, but just keep asking because it'll get better and it'll eventually figure it out. But I'm curious, sort of as we sit here today in sort of August 2025, Patricia, start with you. What are things that haven't worked yet?
It's a hard question for me to answer 30 odd days into my role.
Fair.
Um,
That's fair.
I can answer that with a monologue. I could also answer it with very few words. Right now, what I can tell you is that, or at least where I'm struggling, and this isn't necessarily directly answering your question, but it is where we're struggling, and this is probably something that most marketers can empathize with, is I'm gonna say a bad word, the attribution game. Um,
Oh,
I know I said the dirty word. Um, that is something that we are still ironing out internally, and it is something that I want to put to bed quickly because of
mhm.
the noise that it creates. But I believe that attribution noise is symptomatic of not enough revenue. And if we can focus on the revenue, that the attribution then just becomes a tool for marketers to use to direct investment. And that's where I would like to get us to. But that is an area that we're currently working on. As far as marketing and sales plays, and I'm going to take it back to postal days, early postal days. I it's we're in a space that is evolving very quickly. And it is not uncommon for us to invest in channels that drive traffic to our website that are not looking for a technology solve. They're looking for physical items,
Yeah.
and that really refining our ICP and our persona is something that is constantly a conversation internally, because we have to be very dialed. Otherwise, we drive a lot of traffic that is just dumped in the bin.
Yep. Boy, we can't have a conversation anymore without talking about AI and attribution. It almost always comes
I
up.
know. I know.
Um, and it's, I mean, that's not a dig. It's just like it's, and even Karen made a comment, like it's even when there's revenue, it's still a pain. Even when things are going well, we're still like, what's working, and the complexity of the go-to-market motions will continue to outpace our ability to measure it all. That's another
Mhm.
inconvenient truth that I wish was different, but it's just the law of physics in the way we go to market. And if you choose to say, I only want to do things I can measure, you will not do enough, and you will end up with a lot of money spent and not a lot of impact. Andrew, would love to ask you the same question, like, and feel free to sort of, complain about attribution as well, but like, what's not working, or what are some things you guys have tried that have not generated the success you want?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about attribution, otherwise I think we'll take the next 10, 15 minutes up of the yeah. So I would say I'll stick on the topic of personalization because that's something dear to my heart and I've been trying to do. And I suppose it's about sort of diminishing returns and knowing at what point is personalization too much work to compare to actually getting a benefit from it. So we went overboard on one of our we wanted to do this amazing, highly targeted, highly personalized campaign. It took us like 6 to 9 months to get ready, and we spent huge amounts of money with an agency doing it. And I think we could have done a third of the work and achieved the same result. And I
Mhm.
think it's knowing retrospectively that's very easy to know, but at the time it was like personalization is best, more personalization the better, but there's a limit, I think,
Mhm.
of that sort of thing. So I would, that's a cautionary tale more than actually something not working, more than anything of, and that's why we then went for um, a more scaled down approach that was able to scale, because you know perfect quote something, or perfect is the enemy of progress in this case, and
Yep.
it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be relevant in
Mhm.
that case. So it's getting that balance right, really.
I feel what you're saying, Andrew, to my core. Like, Execution over perfection all day. Just get it out the door.
Yeah.
Can we so okay, we're not gonna use the A word again, but I do wanna ask about scorecards. Like, what are the things that you're measuring? What are the things that you're measuring, and what are the things that you then take up to the board, up to your peers and leadership to sort of measure what's working? And that's I don't mean that I don't looking out for like the one number to rule them all, but like even if it's a peel back the onion sort of layered approach, I'm curious what's on that scorecard.
I spend quite a bit of time measuring our MQL to SQL conversion rate,
Mhm.
because that is my quickest indicator to tell me the quality of the work that we're doing. And from there, that's usually like that's like my health score of like we're healthy, we're unhealthy, and from there I can then dive into what it is we're doing. Um, but that is something that I spend a lot of time with, and that's created a really great partnership, honestly, with sales.
Mhm.
Because if you can reduce the accusatory nature of like I'm sending you so many leads, um, I think that you can really problem solve. And, unfortunately, it sometimes does require like a forensic understanding of why things are getting disqualified. Or when they're, if we've got MQLs flipping to SQLs and they're dying,
Yeah.
why are they dying?
Yeah.
And is that something that marketing can support sales fixing?
Yeah, no, that's a great. I love that focus, right? Because it's a metric that really drives alignment. It's a
Hmm.
metric that is usually not anywhere close to where it needs to be, and it sort of demonstrates that listen, we're focused on quantity, not quality. We're focused on throughput here. We're focused
Hmm.
ultimately on metrics that you can buy a beer with, right? Even
Hmm.
if we have to measure sort of things that are leading indicators to get there. So that's great.
Hmm.
Andrew, I'm curious for you, like what's on your scorecard?
The only thing that my organization and my marketing team care about is pipeline, marketing contributor pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
and marketing contributor bookings. So that is ultimately the only thing that will be the priority. But what I try and do with the ABM element is to do storytelling, which I mentioned before about showing how the reputation, how we're engaging the accounts, engaging people within the accounts through relationships to show how that has come to the pipeline created and the pipeline closed one essentially. So it is we use lots of different. Every account is in a very different life cycle stage. So
Mm-hmm.
the top we can't use the same numbers. We don't use leads for a start in that case because we're not looking at quality quantity. We're looking at if there's 5 people in one account, we're trying to get them to through the adoption stage in one account. By another account, they're 2 or 3 years away for a big renewal. It's more about adoption than it is new pipeline in that case. So every account is unique. So it is always about the bottom dollar so, and storytelling on an account by account basis.
So, tons of evidence, research, and otherwise that indicates how important it is to engage prospects early in the buying journey, how little they want to actually talk to you early in that buying journey, but how
Hmm.
important it is to still do those value deposits and still sort of help them build towards that, consensus driven commitment to change. So, the next question you get from organizations is say, okay, let's say I buy into that. What can I do to accelerate it? What can I do to create more velocity? Do I really just have to wait until the prospect naturally follows that path? Or can I do things that can accelerate the pace of discovery, to accelerate the pace of understanding and quantifying the cost of the problem they did or didn't know that they have? Is that part of the value deposit? Or is there other strategy systems or tactics you need to employ to build that velocity?
I'm going to go back to something Andrew was talking about. So when I hear what you're asking, I think to equipping the internal voices to
Mhm,
sell on your behalf.
mhm.
So how do we find all of the, I would say, when I was in sales, you always say there's people who have a vote and there's people who can just say no.
Yeah.
And how do we get in front of the people who can just say no? And so when, oftentimes people can just say no, it's legal, procurement, CFO. And how do we make sure that they have the information they need to increase priority on this topic or to ensure that they're not going to be a no vote when that decision does come? But I think it goes to equipping those internal voices to be sellers on your behalf.
Oh my god, I think that is so important, right? Because you could have let's say you've got a buying committee of 5. If you have 4 hard yeses and 1 soft no, the deal's dead.
Yes.
right? So finding that person that might be predisposed to not want to do new things, predisposed to really want to protect the status quo.
Mhm.
Andrew, have you found ways to sort of really sort of root that person out? Is it based on the role they have? Are there signals that can give you a sense of who that person is so you can convert them into an ally?
I think that's why we work very closely with the account managers and the CSMs for all the accounts to understand that. I think back to a psychologist I listened to about the concept of fuel and friction. And
Yeah.
adding more fuel to something doesn't mean you're going to get away from it. But if you reduce the friction, address that problem as opposed to just keep pushing your solution, you've got a higher chance of doing that. So yeah, really understanding, seeking to really understand what it is that that individual is challenged with, and either bypassing and going through to different people. We've done that with gone higher up within the organization to try and get that buy-in, or different departments as such. But that's something we do, essentially working incredibly close to with the account manager who has that first-hand insight into the account and the people within it.
Nice. We got about 10 minutes before we want to wrap up, and I want to make sure we get to some audience questions here. So I'm looking through a few that we have coming in already. One is around basically, I'm going to paraphrase here. The question is around org design. And when
Mm.
we think about like what the marketing team needs to look like moving forward, and maybe it's not even fair to say what the marketing team is. So if we were to broaden it and say like our go-to-market team, organization. When we think about that moving forward, the jobs to be done, what people versus agents are doing for us, as we think, I mean, hard to predict where that's all going to go in the next year plus. But as you guys start thinking about 2026 a little bit, how are you thinking about how the org and the accountability charts work inside the company? And this is a place where, Patricia, I think, even though you're only 30 days in on the role,
Mhm.
I'm sure you're thinking about that in terms of like you're already making some shifts to go to market engineering roles. What are some broad strokes you're thinking about for that could guide people listening on what our go-to-market orgs need to look like moving forward?
I think that we're going to see marketing teams have a much, I don't necessarily want to say that the people on them will change, but the proficiency and their expertise will change. My team right now, I've got one, two, three, I have three people who are invested heavily into systems and operations.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one, two, three, four, five traditional marketers. So I'm already starting to weight that far heavier on the business ops side, and
Yeah.
that is because I need to create a tremendous amount of efficiency without adding bodies, and
Mm-hmm.
so I'm focusing a lot of my resources and my budget on the systems.
Yeah, I love hearing that. Love Andrew. How are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I see a bit of an evolution. We're about 250 marketers as a team, and a lot of those marketers are very sort of very specific jobs.
Yeah.
Very as part of that, I see more the generalists actually coming in and into that growing and using tools like AI and stuff like that to fill in the gaps, I suppose, of where knowledge and skill really, and people relying less on more junior members of the team and more AI. Essentially, that's what I'm kind of seeing
Mhm.
as marketing. That the junior roles are uh, that's the heavy lifting is now being able to be done by some elements of AI.
Yeah.
Essentially, so
Mhm.
I see that a bit of a trend where we might not need as many junior roles in marketing.
I think that's a really good call out, Andrew, because the areas where I'm seeing AI really step in and offer us a tremendous amount of scale is kind of like these siloed, specialized marketers roles and functions. It's the context that AI cannot solve for, and that's where you need the generalist and you need the human element to really come in and oversee that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I heard AI being likened to not having one expert, but 1,000 interns, which I thought was a kind of a good kind of thing because
No,
it's
I,
not
I
great,
I don't
it's
hate
not
that
perfect,
analogy.
but it gets you the heavy lifting and gets you to the point where you can take the information and mold it into something as good as you want it to be.
Yeah, I love it. Another question. This is a little bit of a right hand turn here, but on the topic of AI, what are you doing to make sure the LLMs are recommending you more often? right? As we see a slow decrease in people using traditional search and a rapid rise, and it may still be kind of an early adopter land, right?
Mhm.
Depending on the market you're in. But you've got a lot of people that are starting to now go to Gemini, Copilot, Claude, ChatGPT, and use that as their search. So
Mhm.
what are you already doing that is getting the LLMs to know you, to recommend you, and to generate the value deposits and pipeline?
So a little trick is you can actually ask the LLMs how they're how they're presenting their sources. So you can actually go to those places and make sure that you're present. Um, we are we've invested heavily into social, into review engines, and as well as into Reddit. And these are all areas that LMs are known for scraping third party recommendations. And on top of our traditional SEO strategy, these are all kind of like extracurricular things that we're investing in to make sure that we are in that top three.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Simple but effective. Hey, what do you know about us?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Where are you getting these insights?
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. It's amazing how, like, for a long time we sort of, I feel like we over indexed on performance marketing and everything's got to be measured, and now we're back to saying, like, hey, PR is important, man. You got to get a lot of mentions. You need brand mentions, and now you got to get
Yes.
on all the podcasts, do the
Mhm.
podcast media tours. Like, these things have always been important, but now all of a sudden, connect the dots. It becomes there's a playbook for that as well. Andrew,
Mhm.
curious kind of how you guys are thinking through that.
They're definitely thinking about it. We're a little bit slower to
Yeah.
market than probably other people. We're industrial software, so we're probably so years behind sort of normal software, just because the industry is a bit more bigger and slower moving. But
Right.
it's definitely something we're thinking about, especially with a lot of big projects or RFQs, RFIs, and I
Mhm.
could imagine that, and it does happen, that a lot of that process is being expedited through using AI. Instead of doing a lot of research themselves and providing that huge documents and stuff like that, they can do a lot of it using AI essentially. So yeah, it's something we've been heated discussions about,
Yeah.
because we do focus a lot on SEO at the moment. But yeah, it's something we're looking at for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I think it's and the answers today may be different than the answers, later this year into next year as the technology changes and as we sort of observe how people are using, LLMs in a different way than they've used the sort of traditional. It's so funny to say traditional search. Patricia, you were saying like this book in 2011 is an old book, and that makes me feel old right there, right? But
Mhm.
anyway, let's throw up our last poll question. I'm just curious, as we wrap up here, sort of what's one thing you're taking away from this session? I'm very curious to hear just what landed for you as part of this conversation. And as we get people to answer that, would love to have you, Patricia, answer Sherry's question here. As you talked about the things you're doing different in social, what does that look like? Can you go double click on that just a little bit?
Perfect. I was typing. I'm clearly not a very fast typer.
It's all good.
So yes, we're still investing in paid. So take paid out of it.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about when I say investing in social is we want more brand mentions. We are investing time and resources to make sure that when people are having public conversations that could involve Sendoso, that our name is mentioned. That includes whether that is in posts like on LinkedIn, whether that's through Reddit, whether that is on Instagram.
Mhm.
Instagram posts are now being indexed by Google. And so that means that you got to have text. Those are the types of things that I'm referring to. But yes, we're absolutely still running paid. It's just that's not the same, I guess, for the same reason.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone who threw out some audience questions. Fun to sort of mix it up a little bit. And as we wrap up here, Andrew and Patricia, thank you so much for being
Yeah,
generous with your time, with your insights, for being here today. Thank you again to Path Factory for sponsoring this little ditty. Just continue to be excited to work with them and partner with them, and as part of this conversation, and from a signal standpoint, from a journey pathing standpoint, has been really beneficial to us and a lot of our clients as well. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate it. We will have an on-demand version of this available for you if you want to share this conversation with your peers. I know we've got a few associated resources we'll get to you as well. But thank you for attending. Thanks again to our panel, and have a great rest of your day. We'll see you
of
guys soon.
course. Thanks. Have a
Thanks a
great
lot.
one, everyone. Bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.